Roger, once again, Mud Fossil University, today trying to cram in a complete overthrow of all of physics and Einstein and all of those guys and recreate physics in 15 minutes or so. Now, here's what I intend to show you, and with pictures, and no guesses whatsoever. Electron flood theory, which means that the Earth itself has no neutrons, nothing has neutrons. It is a flood of electron tiny particles into the protons, which lock them together like glue. It's like having a whole bunch of marbles inside of a snowball. That is my interpretation. And then the excess of electrons eventually, because it floods the protons until it achieves neutrality basically in the core with an excess negativity, just as enough to force electrons away that are trying to push in. And that creates the orbitals. And it's a very specific arrangement. Now, here's what I intend to show. Light acceleration will be seen. Cherenkov radiation created by that light acceleration will be seen. Electron neutrinos will be seen. Charged particle carriers, which is the bosons, if it's what they're saying, that's what we see. Magnetic field with the ether seen around these charged particle carriers will be seen. Polarized ether will be seen that surrounds everything in the atmosphere. It becomes charged as particles flow through and create large magnetic fields. The right-hand rule will be seen, which means if the electricity is going this way, the field turns this way, and I can demonstrate that and show that for a fact. 100% of every electronic interaction is explained, including gravity and anti-gravity, and an atomic bomb is anti-gravity. I've shown it a million times, and you will see it again today. So that's what I'm going to show you. So I'm going to show you one to tickle you, because intrigue, they say, has its place in everything. This is a light wave. As you can see, it's becoming crushed and forced into a venturi, which radiates out Cherenkov, boson particles, Higgs fields, and something else. Roger, once again, coming from the world of nuclear physics, and huge news today in particle physics. Physicists measure precise value of protons' weak charge for the first time. Well, what is a weak charge, and how did they measure it? It's a little involved, and if you want to read through this is fine. They talk about how they are trying to mingle the forces: gravity and electromagnetism, weak nuclear force, strong nuclear force. All right. I'm going to explain what these things are after they explain what these things are. Alright, you see over here it says scientists calculate the pressure inside a proton, and it's higher than a neutron star. Now, I also have a theory of protons, and it excludes neutrons. There are no neutrons. The particles that swarm the positive particles are electrons. They're not neutrons. They swarm those protons exactly the way two neodymium magnets would slam together with a force that you can't hardly pull apart. So that's just obvious that magnets are going to slam together. They're not going to be floating around at distances apart from each other. Now, however, there will be negatives, the electrons that are swarming the protons, that will try to repel each other. So now they seriously want to be attached to that positive, and they will swarm it and literally crush each other, just the way a bar magnet does. One side is positive, one side is negative, one side has all of its negatives crushed together, the other side is where the positive is. Well, in a proton, I'm not sure if they separate that way. They may fuse together like a snowball of electrons with a whole bunch of marbles inside of it, big ones, that are the protons. And when they swarm together and congeal into that mass of a ball, once the electrons overcome the positive pull, they will start to exclude additional electrons. They will say, you guys stay out of here. We have plenty of electrons. We're all set. The positives have everybody they need down here, so you're going to have to stay out of here. And they will push them into orbits that will be an exact distance based on the magnetic push of the electrons that are in the core. They will push additional electrons away. The additional electrons away will push other ones away. They will congeal in orbitals exactly identical every single time, depending upon the number of protons. That is my theory. It's called electron flood theory. And it also accounts for static electricity, ether, magnetic lines of flux, and we have also photographed an accelerated light, and I believe seen the Higgs boson particles after the Cherenkov radiation cascades into a less restricted space, and after the, this is after the accelerated light slams back into the atmosphere and slows down. Then we see the charged particle carrier headed by the Higgs field. And then we can also see another phenomenon they speak of here, which is partial fields. I will be referring to, and probably have, of Cherenkov radiation. And this is the cone showers that come out, which I was showing you before, those circular showers. They're called electron neutrinos, electron showers. So when they cascade into a slower environment, they explode in these showers. The Cherenkov radiation from electron showers produced by an electron neutrino event produces multiple cones and therefore a diffuse ring and a detector array. So when I talk about Cherenkov radiation, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the kind that is the heavy kind. And you'll see in the accelerated light particles that we did, it's that kind of glowy white. It's like a little higher atomic white than it should be, I believe. All right, this is a standard light from the red pulse laser. It is exciting the ether in the area. That's why these are glowing. This is taken in darkness. By the way, they do admit they don't really have a clue what's going on. It says the current state of particle physics is sort of like a partially explored cave with a shadowy regions. We think we understand the structure of the cave, but there could be entirely new chambers hidden in its shadows. After all, calculations suggest the standard model only describes 4% of all the universe. That's because they don't understand light has mass. Light has mass. They're trying to work with Einstein theory, and it just doesn't work. Light has mass. It leaves the sun as mass and energy. It is dark mass and dark energy on its transit to Earth or wherever it collides with complete energy. It's as simple as that. And when it collides with complete energy, it bounces off it, which creates heat, or it creates light if it bounces. It'll push an electron out at a lower frequency in the visible spectrum. There seems to be something that only allows visible spectrum light out of there normally from collisions. It seems to me, I could be wrong, they might come out at a higher frequency. But I would call that a ricochet. But when they do expel out of there, they create light, and the other factor that happens is the whole structure shakes because it was collided with by an electron. And the more frequency of the electron, the harder the impact. All right, it'll become, let's say, even it comes at a standard speed, which I'm not saying that's true. I don't believe light is a standard speed at all. As a matter of fact, we accelerated, so I'm not believing that whatsoever. Now, when it does come in, though, it tries to force itself into the Earth, into the positive of the Earth. And I've shown this a million times in a million different ways. Atomic bomb is anti-gravity because it expels all of its electrons. It ends up with a positive core. It shoots itself right off the Earth magnetically, not because it's blowing itself up straight like a barrel in the air. No, it is going straight up in the air because it has no electrons left. It is now a positive mass pushed away from the Earth because the Earth is a positive mass, and it wants electrons. All right, the electrons are gone. They crushed them in, and they all exploded away into a brilliant light. Now the mass goes straight up in the air and sucks in all electrons, and it is the brilliant ball at the top of the mushroom cloud. And it's straight up in the air because of anti-gravity. It's time to look at these things in an entirely different light. This is that same wave forced into a venturi, which restricts it and crushes it, which forces all of these energetic particles to invade each other's regions, creating extreme excitement and Cherenkov radiation, and it has absolutely no option whatsoever other than to accelerate. There is no option whatsoever. None. It is accelerated at this point. That is a venturi. There's two round metal cylinders here. It is restricted its space. It's forced everybody into each other's regions. It is extreme chaos. It creates a reverse EMF, electromotive force field, that is enormous. It steps down its radiation. This is called Cherenkov rate, white, which is always from accelerated particles or particles that are stepping down. And that's what's happening here. We accelerated it, now it's stepping down. Cherenkov, no, normally they say, well, it's just stepping down because they don't realize they can accelerate. We accelerated, now it's stepping down. Now it is dropping with quantum characteristics. Virtually, white changes to a spray at this point. The spray is now the charged particles, which are, we're calling them the charge carriers. Right? They are identical, 100% identical to electricity in a wire. They are absolutely 100% identical, but they are not surrounded by a wire. And they are coming through a more resistive. It's air, so it doesn't have the same characteristics as a wire to flow. All right, so it's crashing into the air and creating these shock waves, literally shock waves. This is looking straight down. The accelerator is over here. It's coming through and it's crushed into each other's regions, and now it's in chaos. And it's in each other's force fields, and it cannot stand that. They have to get away from each other. And that is now they're starting to spread out and lose their energy, and they begin to take on their original disc-looking shapes and separating each other, because they are all trying to push away from each other. They are all negative forces, and they're just like two magnets. You push them together, they try to push apart. Well, they were pushed in here so hard that they just destroyed each other into a plasma. When they came out, they started to reorganize back into their normal discs, and I will show you looking into this. Right now we're looking down at the accelerator. Next one we'll be looking into the accelerator. You see how these things are going crossways and all this business? That's because light spins in a circle like this coming through. It spins like a round circle, and the particle heads the circle. All right, just so you understand, light, when it comes into that, it's spinning in a circle just like this. The tip of the light is the tip of the circle is the particle. So the trajectory is straightforward, just like this, and as it hits there, if it hits like this way, it spins off this side. If it hits on this way and it cuts through, it goes on that side. And if it's this way, this way, this way, that's what makes these the same thing over here. Over the top, over the top, over the top. So it depends on how it hits. Most of it gets through the center. So that's why light was always considered a wave. They thought it was doing this, and it would mix this way and that way. It was just all messed. They're wrong. It spins this way, and that's what it is. You can see it's quite obvious. All right, now this is the one where we're looking back into the Venturi. We saw the chaos at the Venturi way up in that area. Now this is downstream, and they have started to take on their disk formations, which you could see before in the other shot. coming out of here, if you can see these very fine filaments, each one of these has a particle at the tip. Well, not, I'm saying a particle. These are the particles. This is the trail left by them. This is the, I believe these are the Higgs fields. They call them Higgs fields. And the field surrounds the particle. So the particle coming through here is the size of electricity in a wire. But it creates a field around it exactly like the electricity in a wire. Electricity in a wire doesn't jump outside the wire to make the field. It's in the wire, and that creates a field outside the wire. And that's what we see. Not only do we see that, we see the polarized dots all the way around. Those are polarized ether particles. The magnetic field turns them into plus, minus, plus, minus, plus, minus, and they turn into certain distances away exactly identical to what a wire would create. If the wire was coming through this way, it would have the identical plate surrounding that wire, traveling with the electron down the wire, identical to that. Identical. All right, I'm going to make a statement that the magnetic fields that surround light particles are identical to the magnetic fields that surround electricity. They are the same thing. These make these round circles, and they are polarized. If you put magnetic particles in there and ran that straight up, they would make that circle, and one would follow each other because it's minus, positive, minus. They're magnetically pulled to each other. Everybody understands how the magnetic filings work. If you put the magnet down and dragged it, they would make a line along it. That is what's happening. It's turned it into a magnet. And what we have done is turned the air magnetic. And why is it magnetic? Because there's a lot of moisture. I'm going to go into all of this. And that right there is the right-hand rule. Now, it's showing it's going this way, so let's go this way. See if I could put my hand upside down and go this way. Now, if it was going that way, it would go against this arrow. So that is what the right-hand rule means. All right, and that's how I showed it in the blue diagram. Now, you see all these plates coming off here. They're coming out, some of them are different colors. You can see that means that the frequency, the spin is different, because that determines the angular momentum is the mass, is the frequency, is literally the color. They talk about leptons creating colors, and I believe it has something to do with this. And I'll show you what they might be talking about as far as an lepton goes. Now, that is the extreme high energy particle, one that is coming higher than all the rest. Somehow it squeaked through that accelerator at an extreme, violent, excited, energetic, just flew out of there. Now, it is so fast, it is catching up to these, and it's going to crash with one of these discs. Now, it has its own extreme disk, magnetic field, and somehow it is not spread out, it is confined. And that I have to understand a little better, because I don't fully understand the confinement of the field, although I do see when they're a higher color ratio than the lower frequency ones, they do seem to restrict, which would tend to drag them in closer to the spin. That's possible, but that baby is spinning. Now I'm going to show you what happens when that thing hits something. All right, here it is. That's that particle. And it's swishing through here, and all of a sudden it's smacked into this one. Well, what is this? This is the field. The particle is deep in the center of that field, so tiny that you really can't see it. But it's shooting through space, and as it does that, it creates the field surrounding the charged particle. So that's the charged particle is the carrier of the field. The field is the Higgs field. And they say this is the mass, and it is. They're right. This is the mass. It depends on how big this field is, how much mass it has. That sucker got a ton of mass. And it hit this one, and it is stepping down to be like this and shedding a portion of its whatever it is. It's shedding a part of its energy. I mean, it's obviously it's even its structure. It's not like spitting out a piece of just like a lightning bolt. It's turned into another circle. It's turned into another one of these. It's turned into another field. So this is a mini field. That means that these being light particles are supposedly the smallest, light fields, I'm sorry. These are the magnetic fields surrounding the light particles. So, in my mind, this is what they're talking when they talk about a light particle. Now, this is now this, or this is now this. Now, that is less than this. Now, I don't know, it might grow to be this. I have no idea. But I can tell you one thing right now. This, crashing into this, stepping down into one of those, and shooting off one of these is a big deal in my mind. A very big deal. All of this stuff is a big deal. I showed accelerated light. There's no question it was accelerated. If you can say that wasn't accelerated, good for you. It's white Cherenkov radiation, exactly what you expect from acceleration. It hit the atmosphere coming after it, showing all that chaos and white, blurry looking stuff turn into orange and red discs. Exactly what you would expect coming into a restricted airspace now, after being extremely excited and accelerated. It gave off particles of those little tiny white filaments, which is exactly what you expect. They are the charge carrier particles. They were all headed by these fields, exactly what you expect, and exactly what happens in a wire. And the iron filings surrounding a wire create the identical same fields, which I am calling, or they call, the Higgs fields. All right, they also call this, all this stuff is electron neutrinos, and I mean, they got all kinds of names. But all I'm saying now is that my theory says there's nothing more than positives and negatives. The negatives flood the core. It builds up till it can't accept any more negatives. They are locked solid against there. They will fight each other, and they will eventually overcome any ones that can come in, and they will put them into orbitals, and then you have your quantum distances, and they will line up exactly identical every time. There will be no difference between these molecules depending upon how many protons they have in the nucleus, because that is absolute. They're going to take on enough negativeness to overcome their positiveness, and then the negatives cannot penetrate anymore. They sit in their orbitals. Let's close that case. So I'm saying that shows quantum would work absolutely flawlessly there. The core would be stable. When you crushed it into a nuclear explosion, it would shoot off all its electrons, exactly what is seen, and then you would see this. You'll come to learn exactly the story behind this too. All right, I'm going to explain to you what's going to happen. The Earth is a positive core. It sucks electrons. It sucks down light. Electrons. Negatives are electrons. They're light. They suck to Earth. Anything that has electrons in it, which is everything that has electrons, is complete matter, gets sucked to the Earth. So everything gets sucked to Earth except things that have no electrons. So if we could create something that has no electrons, we can push that away from Earth. And that's what happens in a nuclear bomb. The first thing that will happen is it compresses all of the material till everything is involved in everybody else's business. It can't be together like that. They will not allow this. Poof! They take off, and a brilliant white light burns everything in sight. And then the shock wave, of course, takes off because it just shocks the whole nature of the atmosphere. And then watch what happens. It doesn't go out like this, like a bomb, like a big round ball. It goes straight up in the air, and what is in the air is glowing and burning and trying to suck back everything, and that's why they call it a mushroom cloud. It sucks back everything, trying to get back electrons into its positive core, which is being thrown from the Earth because of anti-gravity positive core, non-negative particles. It's a positive chunk of matter at this point. Here it goes. Boom, straight up in the air. There's all your glowing and all that business, and here all the shock wave is going out, and here it goes. Where is the fire now? The fire is straight up in the air. It is sucking everything off the Earth and boiling straight into the air. And it is trying to suck back every electron that it can get because it is a positive mass now. So it pulls everything back into itself, straight up in the air. All right, that's not normal. That should have gone out every which way. It pulls a tiny little strip right up with it, and I'll show you another shot. All right, here's from another angle. This time you're going to see it just exactly what I said. It's going to go straight up in the air. All right. Again, positive force. Boom. There goes all your electrons. A whole bunch of life. That is the interaction of the electrons going through, vaporizing the atmosphere. And there is what happens to the nuclear core. And there it is. And at this point, it no longer has any electrons. So what does it want to do? It wants to pull electrons back in. That's where your energy is now. All of this is done. Now it says, give me more electrons. Bring them back to me. Bring them back to me. These are individual trails of particles, which are the boson charge carriers. They are spinning to the right as they travel this way, and they are compressing. They were accelerated coming out, and they are now compressing. The drift to the left indicates a spin to the right. These are each one of these is a particle trail. All right, you should go watch the whole thing up here. It's on YouTube. It's called Higgs Field Seen Dividing and Caught on Tape. And I go through the whole thing and show a lot of different stuff that you didn't see. It's 17 minutes long. So, and then I have a whole batch of other ones up there. I must have a dozen of them on this same phenomena. And I go through sonoluminescence and the Chinese water bowl where they shake it and they vibrate it so bad it rips and tears, and that creates sonoluminescence. I go through every type of electrical interaction, and every single one of them works. Every single one works. And gravity is nothing more than the negative of everything. Every mass has negative in it. Right? The mass of the Earth has negative, but it has a strong positive core. So everything that has a positive and negatives is attracted to each other, and everything that has negative is attracted to everything except itself. That's why it's dark in space. You don't see it because it's not attracted to itself. The only time you see it is when it interacts with something and collides with it. It bangs it. And that's why they say, oh, if you look and it changes the outcome. Well, of course it does. You saw the electron. It banged your eyeball. That's what it's supposed to do. It's a particle smashes into you. What do you expect? It's done. Of course it changes it. If it went by, it went by. If it hits you, it hits you. It's all over. So, I mean, we got to get away from Einstein. The Einstein thing really ruined everything. Ruined everything. And the whole idea of a wave and not a particle, and they're photons, and there's no mass to these things, and it's just, and even E equals mc squared. E equals mc squared it states, if Einstein was correct about everything he said, light has no mass. E equals mc squared says light has no energy. I mean, that's insanity. And everybody bought it and said, oh boy, it's a big fancy thing. So, come up to Mud Fossil University, learn about the reality of life. Confront your professors, ask them about this. Tell them to go up here and see this. Higgs field seen dividing and caught on tape. What is that guy talking about? Ask him. All right? Mud Fossil University, the citadel of truth.